The grand meeting hall of the Stellar Alliance stretched high above, its ancient crystal walls glowing with the soft light of 1,000 distant stars. Captain Reed stood before the Elder Council, his tail twitching with barely contained excitement. He was young for a ship captain, his scales still showing the bright blue of youth, rather than the deeper purple of experience. "Honorable elders," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of 12 ancient beings staring down at him. "My exploration vessel Seeker has detected unusual energy patterns from Sector 47B. We believe these signals indicate advanced technological development." Elder First leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the young captain. The ancient being's scales had long since turned almost black with age, and wisdom seemed to radiate from his every movement. "Sector 47B," he repeated slowly, each word dropping like a stone into still water. "You mean the quarantine zone." Reed's excitement dimmed slightly, but he pressed on. "Yes, Elder. The signals appear to be coming from the third planet of a yellow star system. We've cross-referenced our charts, and this planet is called Earth." Elder First interrupted, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the entire chamber. "You speak of Earth." The other council members stirred uneasily, their scales shifting colors in what Reed recognized as signs of deep distress. He hadn't expected such a strong reaction to a simple exploration report. "The planet has been under quarantine for 10,000 cycles." Another elder spoke, her voice trembling. "There are reasons we do not approach that system, young one." Reed fought back his frustration. He had expected resistance, but not this level of fear from the supposedly wisest beings in the Alliance. "With respect, elders, these signals suggest the species there has achieved nuclear fission. They're advancing quickly. If we don't make contact soon, they might develop interstellar travel on their own, without our guidance." Elder First rose from his seat, his massive form towering over the chamber. "You think we don't know this?" His voice carried neither anger nor judgment, only a deep sadness. "Tell me, young Reed, have you heard of the Bright Star Empire?" Reed shook his head. "Of course not. They vanished 8,000 cycles ago, shortly after they ignored our warnings and approached Earth. The Crystal Collective, the Unity of Seven, all gone. Each believed they could safely study or contact Earth. Each disappeared within a few hundred cycles of their first contact." Reed's scales rippled with disbelief. "Surely you don't suggest a primitive nuclear age species could threaten established spacefaring civilizations?" Elder First moved closer, his ancient eyes fixing Reed with a penetrating stare. "The species you call primitive developed from prey animals on a death world. Their entire history is an endless cycle of conflict and innovation. They survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and their own nuclear weapons. They've split the atom without destroying themselves. They wage war even as they reach for the stars." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We don't quarantine Earth to protect them from us, Captain Reed. We quarantine it to protect ourselves from them." But Reed saw opportunity where the elders saw danger. His scales flickered with patterns of determination and ambition. Or perhaps those civilizations disappeared because they approached Earth as conquerors or studies, not as equals. "My crew is different. We can learn from their mistakes." "Your crew," Elder First said softly, "will not approach Earth. This is not a request, Captain. It is an order." Reed bowed low, his scales showing proper respect. "Of course, Elder. I understand completely." But as he walked out of the chamber, his mind was already racing with plans. The Seeker was fast, its sensors more advanced than anything the ancient Alliance ships could track. By the time anyone realized he had entered the quarantine zone, he would have proof that the elders' fears were nothing but superstition. 3 days later, the Seeker quietly slipped out of its designated patrol route and set course for the yellow star that harbored Earth. As the ship vanished into jump space, Elder First stood at his observatory window, watching the distant stars with ancient, worried eyes. "They never listen," he whispered to the darkness. "They never listen at all." The Seeker dropped out of jump space at the edge of the Sol system, its stealth systems already active. Captain Reeves stood at the command center, watching the holographic display as it showed their target. A beautiful blue-green planet, third from its sun. "Report," he ordered, his scales shimming with anticipation. Science Officer Miller moved her fingers through the data streams flowing around her. "The planet shows extensive modification, Captain. Large cities, orbital satellites, and significant atmospheric changes. They're definitely in an industrial phase. Primitive but advancing," Reed noted, his tail swaying with satisfaction. "What about their weapons?" "Nuclear capabilities confirmed," Miller said, "but their delivery systems are crude. No energy weapons, no gravity manipulation, no force fields. They're still using chemical rockets to reach their own moon." The crew watched the displays showing Earth's activities. Countless signals bounced between the planet and its satellites. Ground-based telescopes swept the skies. Military vessels, all water-based or atmospheric, patrolled their territories. "Look at how they fight each other," Navigator Thompson observed, his scales rippling with disgust. "3 major conflicts active right now. They can't even unify their own species." Reed moved closer to the main display, studying the planet's night side where city lights created webs of illumination across entire continents. "No, look closer. They fight, yes, but they also build. Those lights show coordination and planning on a massive scale. Their wars haven't stopped their progress." Miller's scales suddenly flashed warning colors. "Captain, you need to see this data. Their communication patterns, they're unlike anything in our records." The crew gathered around her station as she displayed her findings. Earth's information networks pulsed with activity. Billions of simultaneous connections, constant innovation, endless adaptation. "Their information processing is evolving in real time," Miller explained, her voice trembling slightly. "They create new communication methods almost daily. Their youngest members adapt to new technology instantly, while their oldest still use primitive tools. But somehow, it all works together." Reed watched the data streams with growing fascination. How do they manage such chaos without collapse? "That's just it, sir," Miller said. "The chaos seems to drive their development. Look at this. When one system fails, they don't just repair it. They improve it, then immediately start trying to break it again. They intentionally test their own weaknesses." Navigator Thompson's scales paled, like immune system responses. They treat their entire civilization like it's fighting an infection. Because that's what their whole history has been, Miller realized. Elder First was right. They evolved as prey animals. Their entire civilization is built on surviving repeated disasters. Reed dismissed their concerns with a flick of his tail. "All the more reason to study them now, before they develop further. Prepare a stealth probe for launch. We'll collect surface samples and observe their settlements up close." "Captain," Miller protested, her scales showing deep worry. "Our models can't predict how they'll react. Their response patterns don't match any known species behaviors. They're pre-space flight," Reed said firmly. "Their detection capabilities are limited to radio waves and optical observation. Our stealth technology is beyond their comprehension." As the crew prepared the probe, Miller continued studying the data streams. Something about the humans' communication patterns bothered her. They showed signs of anticipation, as if their constant technological probing wasn't just about improvement, but preparation. The probe launched silently, its advanced cloaking systems making it invisible to any known detection methods. As it descended toward Earth's atmosphere, Miller noticed a subtle change in the human communications. A few of their orbital satellites adjusted their positions slightly. A handful of ground-based telescopes altered their scanning patterns. But surely that was just coincidence, wasn't it? The probe continued its descent, carrying the first pieces of alien technology to touch Earth's atmosphere in 10,000 years. In a small observatory in the planet's southern hemisphere, a young human researcher noticed an unusual reading on her instruments. She double-checked the data, then reached for her phone. The call she was about to make would change everything. Everything went wrong in less than 6 hours. The first sign of trouble came when the probe's signals became erratic during its descent. Science Officer Miller noticed it first. A slight delay in the data stream, barely lasting a second. Probably just atmospheric interference, Reed said, his scales showing confidence despite Miller's concern. Continue the mission. The probe landed in a remote area, far from the larger human settlements. Its sensors deployed, beginning to analyze soil samples and air composition. Everything worked perfectly for exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. Then the humans arrived. Captain, Navigator Thompson's scales flashed emergency colors. Ground vehicles approaching the probe's location. Multiple types, military vehicles among them. Reed's tail twitched nervously. Impossible. They can't detect our technology. They shouldn't be able to, Miller agreed, her fingers dancing through the data streams. But look at these communication patterns. This isn't random. They knew exactly where to look. The crew watched in stunned silence as human military forces surrounded the probe's location. More vehicles arrived every minute, not just military, but scientific teams, government officials, and what appeared to be civilian experts. Retrieve the probe, Reed ordered. Full emergency recall. Miller tried, her scales paling. No response. They're blocking our signal somehow. They can't block what they don't understand, Reed insisted, but his own scales were showing fear patterns now. The main display showed a new development. Human satellites were changing their orbits, moving to create a detection net above the probe's location. Ground-based radar stations had altered their scanning patterns. Even civilian communications were being redirected to avoid the area. Look at their response time, Miller whispered. This isn't first contact protocol. This is a practiced defense plan. They were ready for us. Reed's scales rippled with disbelief. How could they be ready? They'd never encountered alien life. No, Thompson said slowly, but they've imagined it. Over and over. He pulled up human entertainment broadcasts. Look at these. Thousands of stories about alien contact. They'd been preparing for us in their minds for generations. The situation deteriorated faster than anyone could have predicted. Within 5 hours, human military forces had not just contained the probe, they had begun to dismantle it. Their approach showed disturbing efficiency, as if they'd rehearsed this exact scenario. They're treating it like an immune response, Miller realized, watching the humans work. Identify, contain, analyze, adapt. They're not just studying our technology. They're learning to counter it. Reed paced the command center, his tail lashing with agitation. One probe. We lost one probe. We can still salvage this. Then the final blow came. Thompson's scales turned almost white with shock. Captain, they're tracking us. What? The humans. They've backtraced the probe's control signals. Their satellites are already adjusting to track our position. And look at these energy readings from their military bases. The display showed human forces mobilizing worldwide. Not in panic, but with practiced precision. Military units moved into predetermined positions. Scientists were being evacuated to secure facilities. Global communication networks shifted to emergency protocols that somehow seemed designed for exactly this situation. How long have they been planning this? Reed whispered. Their entire history, Miller answered, understanding finally dawning. Every war, every crisis, every disaster. It was all practice for this moment. The elders were right. We're not looking at a primitive species discovering advanced technology. She paused, her scales showing pure terror as new data poured in. Human weapon systems were powering up worldwide. Their satellites were already mapping the seeker's position with impossible accuracy, and in research facilities across the planet, scientists were beginning to decode the probe's technology at a speed that defied all known learning curves. We're looking at a survival machine that just found its first real test. Reed stared at the beautiful blue-green planet below, finally understanding why the elders had been so afraid. They hadn't quarantined a primitive species. They'd caged a sleeping giant, and he had just woken it up. The next 48 hours aboard the Seeker were a nightmare of escalating revelations. They've already reverse-engineered the probe's power source, Miller reported, her scales practically colorless with shock. They're not just copying it, they're improving it. Reed watched the main display as humans worldwide mobilized with frightening efficiency. Their response wasn't chaotic or fearful. Instead, their entire civilization shifted like a single organism responding to a threat. "Show me their communication patterns again," he ordered. The display lit up with countless data streams. Where there had been division before, now there was unity. Former enemy nations shared information freely. Scientific rivals published their findings openly. Military forces that had been fighting each other days ago now coordinated their movements. "Look at this," Thompson said, pulling up new data. "They're converting civilian factories to military production, but they're not building traditional weapons." He zoomed in on one facility. "They're combining their existing technology with concepts they learned from our probe, creating hybrid weapons we've never seen before." Miller's analysis painted an even more disturbing picture. Their learning speed is impossible. They're not just adapting our technology. They're finding weaknesses we didn't even know existed. Look at how they modified the probe's power core. The display showed human scientists taking apart the alien power source. Instead of simply studying it, they were stress testing it, intentionally pushing it to failure, learning from each mistake. Each failure led to a new innovation, shared instantly across their global networks. "They're treating our technology like a virus," Miller realized. "Study it, break it down, develop countermeasures, create antibodies. Their entire scientific process mirrors their biological immune response." Reed's tail twitched nervously as he studied the latest reports. Human military units had surrounded every major telescope array on their planet. Their primitive radar systems had been modified using principles learned from the probe, creating a detection net that could now track the Seeker despite its advanced stealth systems. "What about their space capabilities?" he asked. Thompson's scales flickered with worry. "They've converted their primitive chemical rockets into hybrid drives using our power technology. Crude, but effective. They're launching something new every 3 hours. Some kind of defensive satellite network." 3 hours. Reed's scales paled. "That's impossible," Miller finished. "Like everything else they're doing. Captain, look at this." She displayed images from human cities. Instead of panic in the streets, there was purpose. Schools had become research centers, factories retooled overnight, military bases transformed into joint operations centers where former enemies worked side by side. "Their entire history prepared them for this," she said softly. "All their wars, their disasters, their constant conflicts. It trained them to adapt instantly to new threats. They don't fear the unknown. They'd weaponize it." A new alert flashed across the main display. The humans had launched another satellite, larger than the others. As they watched, it unfolded in orbit, revealing a strange hybrid of human and alien technology. "What is that?" Reed whispered. Miller's analysis appeared on the screen. "They've built a testing platform. They're going to use it to experiment with our technology in zero gravity. Captain, they're not just learning about us. They're preparing to come after us." Thompson's scales showed pure terror as he studied the readings. "Their rate of advancement, if this continues. They'll match our technology level within months," Miller finished, "and surpass it within a year. Everything they learn, they improve. Every weakness they find, they eliminate. They're not just adapting to our presence." She paused, watching as more human ships launched into orbit, each one more advanced than the last. "They're treating us like an infection, and their immune response is building an army." Reed stared at the rapidly evolving human defenses, finally understanding what Elder First had tried to warn him about. He wasn't watching a primitive species discover advanced technology. He was watching evolution itself wake up and go to war. We need to leave. Now. Captain Reed's scales flashed urgent patterns as he watched the latest sensor data. Plot a course back to Alliance space. But Navigator Thompson's scales had turned pale gray with fear. Sir, we can't. What do you mean we can't? Look at this. Thompson's trembling fingers brought up a tactical display. The humans had positioned their new hybrid satellites in a complex web around Earth. But they weren't just defensive positions. They were nodes in a massive gravitational net. They've adapted our own gravity manipulation technology, Miller explained, her voice shaking. They're creating a containment field. We're already trapped. Reed's tail lashed in frustration. That's impossible. They couldn't have mastered gravity manipulation so quickly. They didn't master it, Miller said. They just figured out how to break it. Look at these energy patterns. They're using crude but effective methods, like a primitive blade against advanced armor. Sometimes simple is more dangerous than sophisticated. The main display showed more human ships rising from Earth. Each one looked different from the last, as if they were evolving in real time. Some used modified chemical engines. Others had hybrid drives reverse-engineered from the probe. All of them carried weapons that merged human and alien technology in ways the Seeker's crew had never seen before. Their weapon systems, Thompson reported, they're not elegant, but they're unpredictable. Our defense computers can't calculate their attack patterns because they keep changing their own technology mid-flight. Reed watched as another human vessel approached, its design unlike anything he'd seen before. How are they coordinating all this? Their communication technology was primitive just days ago. Miller's analysis appeared on the screen. They're using our probe's quantum communication principles, but they've merged it with their global computer network. It's messy and inefficient, but it works. They sacrifice elegance for speed of adaptation. A new alert flashed across the command center. The humans had launched something new. Dozens of small, fast-moving objects heading straight for the Seeker. Analysis. Reed demanded. There? Miller's scales rippled with disbelief. They're targeting our communication arrays. They figured out how we send messages back to the Alliance. They're not just trying to capture us. They're trying to prevent us from warning others. Thompson's sensors picked up more disturbing news. Captain, I'm detecting quantum communication signals from the direction of our nearest outpost. The humans, they've already found it. They backtraced our previous transmissions. The reality of their situation hit Reed like a physical blow. They weren't dealing with a primitive species stumbling upon advanced technology. They were facing an entire civilization that had spent its whole existence preparing for this moment, even if they hadn't known it. Show me their global response again, he ordered. The display lit up with images from across Earth. Factories worked around the clock, each new production run incorporating improvements from the last. Scientific centers shared discoveries instantly across their network. Military forces moved with practiced precision, executing plans that seemed to have existed for generations. Sir, Miller said quietly, they're not just studying our technology anymore. They're studying us, learning our patterns, finding our weaknesses. A massive energy spike appeared on the sensors. The humans had activated something new, a weapon that combined their nuclear technology with principles from the probe's power core. They're not afraid. Reed realized, all our advanced technology, all our supposed superiority, they see it as a challenge, a puzzle to solve, a threat to overcome. The human ships drew closer, their hybrid weapons armed. The gravitational net tightened. Earth's first true space fleet was about to capture an alien vessel, using technology they hadn't even known existed a week ago. Reed stared at the approaching ships, finally understanding what his arrogance had unleashed. He hadn't discovered a primitive world. He had awakened humanity's ultimate evolution, their ability to turn any threat into a weapon, any challenge into an advantage. And now, they were coming for the stars. The boarding was quick and efficient. Human soldiers, wearing armor that combined their own protective designs with reversed-engineered alien technology, secured the Seekers' vital areas in less than 20 minutes. Reed watched from the command center as the humans moved through his ship with practiced precision. Their tactics weren't elegant, but they were thorough. They didn't just secure areas. They studied everything they saw, their helmet cameras transmitting data back to Earth for immediate analysis. They're not just copying technology anymore, Miller observed, her scales showing resignation. They're learning our movement patterns, our ship layout logic, our security protocols. Everything they see becomes data to analyze. A human officer, wearing more elaborate armor than the others, approached Reed. The universal translator activated automatically. "Captain," the human said, "we need access to your ship's historical records." Reed's scales flickered with surprise. Not their weapon systems, not their star maps. Their history. Why? "Because we found something interesting in your probe's data banks," the human replied. "References to other alien civilizations that visited Earth before. Civilizations that don't seem to exist anymore." The human's words hit Reed like a physical blow. He remembered Elder First's warning about the Bright Star Empire, the Crystal Collective, the Unity of Seven. All gone after contacting Earth. "The records are in the main computer," Reed said quietly. "I'll help you access them." As the humans downloaded the Seekers' historical database, Miller studied their behavior. "Look at how they process information," she said. "They're not just taking data. They're testing it, challenging it, looking for patterns we might have missed." The human scientists examining the records worked with incredible focus. They compared the alien historical data with their own records, finding correlations no one had noticed before. "Here," one scientist said, pointing to a display, "astronomical records from 8,000 years ago. A sudden shift in the Bright Star Empire's expansion pattern. They visited Earth. Then they began to change," another human finished. "Their technology evolved rapidly, too rapidly. Their society couldn't handle the pace of advancement." More correlations appeared. The Crystal Collective's final transmission showed signs of desperate attempts to match Earth's rate of innovation. The Unity of Seven's last recorded messages spoke of impossible adaptation speeds and evolutionary pressure beyond control. "We didn't destroy them," a human scientist realized. "They destroyed themselves trying to keep up with our potential. Our constant conflict, our endless drive to improve, our ability to adapt. It created evolutionary pressure they couldn't match." Reed's scales showed patterns of deep understanding. "That's why the elders quarantined Earth. Not to protect you from us, but to protect the galaxy from humanity's influence," the human officer finished. "Our very existence creates an arms race. Any civilization that contacts us either has to match our rate of advancement or fall behind." Miller's analysis of the historical data revealed more. Every civilization that had contacted Earth had followed the same pattern. First came observation, then came attempt at control. Finally came desperate innovation as they tried to match humanity's pace of advancement. "Your civilizations evolved in balance," a human scientist explained. "Slow, steady progress, careful advancement. But Earth," he gestured at the displays showing humanity's response to the probe. "Earth is evolutionary pressure incarnate. We don't just adapt. We force everything around us to adapt or die." Reed watched as the humans continued to study his ship, each discovery leading to new innovations, new adaptations, new improvements. They didn't just learn. They evolved with every passing moment. "The elders understood," he said quietly. "They knew that humanity wasn't just another species. You're a force of nature, a cosmic evolutionary pressure point." The human officer nodded. "And now that we know about the rest of the galaxy." Reed's scales showed pure resignation. Now everything changes. The quarantine had failed. Humanity was loose in the galaxy, and the greatest evolutionary arms race in cosmic history was about to begin. The Great Hall of the Stellar Alliance had never been so quiet, Elder First stood at the center, his ancient scales almost black with age, as he watched the approaching delegation. The humans walked with confident steps, wearing their own ceremonial clothing rather than adopting Alliance customs. Their delegation included military officers, scientists, and diplomats, but all of them moved with the same purposeful efficiency. Behind them, visible through the hall's crystal walls, waited Earth's first true interstellar fleet. The ships were a striking mix of human ingenuity and adapted alien technology. No two vessels looked exactly alike. Each one represented continuous evolution and improvement. "Welcome to the Stellar Alliance," Elder First said, his translator conveying his words perfectly, using technology reverse-engineered from the Seeker's systems. The human ambassador stepped forward. She carried herself with dignity, but her eyes showed that same intense curiosity that had already changed so much. "Thank you for receiving us, Elder First. Though we both know this isn't exactly a standard first contact situation." Reed watched from the side, his scales still showing shame at his role in all this. In just 3 months, humanity had mastered interstellar travel, built a fleet, and mapped major Alliance trade routes. They hadn't just adapted, they had transformed their entire civilization. "We've studied the records from Captain Reed's ship," the ambassador continued. "We understand why Earth was quarantined, why you feared our influence on galactic civilization." Elder First's scales rippled with ancient wisdom. "And yet you come here not with conquest in mind, but diplomacy. Despite your clear tactical advantage." The main display activated, showing tactical data. Human ships had already positioned themselves near major Alliance worlds, not as a threat, but as a demonstration. They could have struck anywhere at any time. "Conquest is inefficient," a human military officer explained. "It creates resistance, wastes resources, slows advancement. We prefer cooperation, innovation through collaboration rather than conflict." The human scientists stepped forward, activating their own displays. They showed new technologies, improvements on Alliance designs that solved problems the Alliance hadn't even recognized as problems. "We don't want to replace your civilization," the ambassador said. "We want to help it evolve. Not at our pace, that would be destructive, as history shows. But together, we can find a balance between advancement and stability." Elder First studied the humans carefully. "And if we refuse? If we choose to maintain the quarantine?" The ambassador's expression remained diplomatic, but her words carried clear meaning. "The quarantine was breached the moment Captain Reed entered our solar system. Change is inevitable now. The only choice is whether that change comes through cooperation or competition." The human delegation had brought proof of their intentions. Plans for improved medical technology, more efficient energy systems, safer FTL drive designs. But most importantly, they'd brought a new perspective. The ability to see stagnation not as stability, but as vulnerability. "Your civilizations evolved in balance," the ambassador said. "But the galaxy isn't balanced. It's dynamic, constantly changing. Sooner or later, something would have forced evolution. We're offering to help guide that evolution, rather than letting it happen chaotically." Elder First looked out at the human fleet again. Each ship was different, each design evolving even as they waited. Humanity didn't just adapt. They transformed adaptation itself into an art form. "The records speak of your wars," he said quietly. "Your conflicts, your divisions." "Yes," the ambassador agreed. "We fought. We struggled. We nearly destroyed ourselves many times. But each crisis made us stronger, more adaptable. We learned to turn conflict into progress, competition into innovation. Now we're offering to teach you how to do the same, safely, controlled, without the devastating pressure that destroyed the civilizations that came before." Elder First's scales showed patterns of deep thought. The choice was clear: adapt with humanity's help, or be forced to adapt by their mere presence. "Welcome," he said finally, "to the beginning of a new age." The ambassador smiled. Humanity had emerged onto the galactic stage, not as conquerors or victims, but as catalysts. The greatest evolutionary experiment in cosmic history was about to begin. And this time, everyone would evolve together.